Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Sierra Ladroma. I am the project manager for the Iowa Center's Women's Business Center. The Iowa Center's Women's Business Center is funded in part through a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Small Business Administration. It's incredible to be able to bring inspiring entrepreneurs, workshops, and events to the community. Many of you would have received an email with a form to complete. Please do so after this event. This information allows us to continue providing free educational programming for small business owners in Iowa. I'll also put that form in the chat option below. Feel free to use that chat option to ask questions or comments. Today's guest is Ronee Andersen. Ronee is an experienced human resources professional with 20 years of experience in companies from 50 to 6,000 employees. Ronee is passionate about leadership and team development, culture creation, and helping individuals and organizations meet their full potential. Please help me in welcoming Ronee Andersen.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. First of all, before I share my screen, I just want to say hello to everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, for taking your lunch hour to meet with us and learn a little bit more about organizational or company culture. I'm very passionate about this, so I'm excited to share with you today. So give me a moment here and I will try to get my screen up here. There we go. We're ready. So if you're in the right place, as we talked about, we're here today to learn about the company culture, organizational culture, or maybe business culture, however you want to refer to it, and look at how you can use that to be a competitive advantage for you. So kind of our goals and objectives for today, we're going to talk about what is company culture, at least get a definition so that we're all on the same page for the next 45 minutes or so. Why does it matter? We'll spend a fair amount of time on that because I really want to impress on you how incredibly important it is to have a strong, effective, high-performing culture. Then what are the pieces to an organizational culture? We'll talk about the 4 types of company culture. And then the last thing here, I have a call to action. The reason that I have a call to action is I want this webinar to be educational, but I also want it to be transformational. So I don't want you to just, listen to this, say, sounds like good information, and you don't incorporate any of the information that you hear about today. So again, I'm going to have a little call to action for you at the very end here. So we're going to start with what is company culture. I took a definition from Daniel Coyle, who wrote the Cultural Code. According to him, culture is a set of living relationships working towards a shared goal. It's not something you do, or excuse me, it's not something you are, it's something that you do. So to try to pare that down a little bit more, I wrote my own little definition down there. It's the behaviors demonstrated within the company. So one way to just look at that is if you want to think of culture equals behavior. So think about that as we go through this this afternoon. I think that simple definition will just kind of help you see how you can make that culture come to life and how that frames your culture, again, according to the behaviors that are happening within your company. So I want to start out here with a real quick poll question. If you could, thinking about that definition we just talked about, describe your current culture in one word.
So we have transformative, holistic, collaborative, balanced.
Those all sound like very healthy cultures. So that's good. That's positive. I like it. All right, so want to just touch base on the Hawthorne effects. When I was a sophomore or junior in college, I got my undergraduate degree in the social sciences. So I was either, again, a sophomore or junior, and we learned about the Hawthorne effects. It was a study done way back in the 30s, and it was done at an electric company, and they were looking at productivity using lighting. They were trying to determine whether if they increased the lighting or decreased, or what was the what was the optimal point of where they got the most production from the employees with regards to lighting. And what they found out was it didn't matter where the lighting was, production increased because the employees were being studied and being paid attention to. So that was kind of my aha moment for me. It's like, if you want your employees to be more productive, which obviously increases your bottom line, it makes a difference in the way that you treat them. And that it was, again, kind of an aha moment for me in realizing that how truly important this aspect is. And that, so I want to kind of just touch base on some of the things that came about from that study. And don't let this screen scare you. I promise you, this is the wordiest slide today. I don't want this to be death by PowerPoint. But I do want to just touch on some things that came out of the Hawthorne Effects, because I think it's really important. So there was 4 things that conclusions that came. The first one was the aptitude of the individuals are imperfect predictors of job performance. So although they give some indication of the physical and mental potentials of the individuals, the amount produced is strongly influenced by social factors. So you may have some top-notch employees that really know their stuff, very smart, very intelligent, but there's going to be an influence with regards to the social factors within your organization or your company. And so you need to be very mindful of that, and try to, from the beginning, try to create the right kind of culture that you want to kind of set the stage for how you want your culture to be. Now, if you've had your company for a while or that, you may want to look at it, see if you need to make some adjustments on the way that you're doing things within the company. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Another thing that the Hawthorne Effects demonstrated was that informal organizations affect productivity. The Hawthorne researchers discovered a group life amongst the workers. The study also showed that the relationship that supervisors develop with workers tend to influence the manner in which the workers carry out directives. So I don't think that culture and the leaders of the organization can be separate. And what I mean by that is, I don't think that you can have a highly effective culture without having highly effective leaders, and vice versa. So they really go hand in hand. I think that you need to spend a lot of time on your leadership development, and make sure that you have strong leaders that will then trickle down into the type of culture that you have within the company. I hope that makes sense to anyone. If you have questions later about that, please let me know. Third, work group norms affect productivity. So the Hawthorne researchers were not the first to recognize that work groups tend to arrive at norms of what a fair day's work is. However, they provide the best systemic description and interpretation of the phenomenon. So again, the dynamics of your organization is going to determine what a fair day work is. So it's going to determine how much effort your employees put in to their work for you. So again, just showing you that this thing called organizational culture is extremely important. And lastly, the workplace is a social system. The Hawthorne researchers came to view the workplace as a social system made up of interdependent parts. So I think it's really the first time they recognized this. I think it's become more noticeable in the last few years how incredibly important it is. And the things that we're talking about today, a lot of organizations in that have ping pong tables and things like that. And why I think those are important, the kind of culture that I'm talking about here today is being one of trust and integrity and psychological safety and all those things that you want to incorporate into your organization so that, again, it's a healthy environment for your employees and for you as well. All right. So I want to know how many of you have worked in what you would consider to be a toxic work environment. Oh, Molly's raised her question. Oh, okay. See. Thank you, Sierra. Oh, wow. Okay. 85%. I don't know. Can they see the results, Sierra?
Not yet, but I am going to end it in
Okay.
3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Here we go.
Oh, so you're sharing those now, they can see those?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, perfect. Wow, wow, wow. I have to be honest with you, everyone. That is higher than I expected it to be. Part of the reason I wanted to ask this is that I don't know for sure, but I'm going to assume several of you that are on this call are in a leadership role, or maybe own the business or the organization or that. Now I want you to think about for a moment, do you, of the 13 of you that said yes, you worked in a toxic work environment, and you don't have to answer this in a poll or anything, I just want you to think about this. Do you think the leaders knew that and they didn't care anyway? Or was it that they didn't realize that it was a toxic work environment? And the reason that I ask that, I want you to reflect on that, especially if you are leaders or again, you own the business, is that what you think may be a healthy work environment, the employees may be looking at and viewing in a different perspective. And so one of the things that I would recommend is that you do a company audit of your culture that's done independently, so that employees feel that they can express their views without any repercussions, or that they think that they're going to be kept confidential. So, you know, and why this makes, I think a lot of times all this information that I'm giving is common sense. I don't think I'm going to share anything that is just earth-shattering to you, but again, look at our poll here, and 87% of the people saying they worked in a toxic work environment. It's not something I think that you can take for granted, and something that I think that you have to work at, and that you need to ask your employees how they feel about the work environment. So we can ask the second question. I'm hoping those people, let's see if these people that were in a toxic also have had the opportunity to work in a healthy work environment.
It looks like the majority of the answers are yes. We don't have a no yet.
Yes, everyone. I see 12. It looks like 12.
Yeah.
12 of all said yes. So cool. Good. Great. I'm glad to see that the majority, I don't know if it's the majority of you, but everyone that answered, there was 100% yes of the 12 people that participated saying that they have worked in a healthy work environment. So that gives you, you know, something to compare and look at, and what were the differences in that toxic work environment and what was in that healthy work environment, and you know, what can you bring to your organization that make sure that it is a healthy work environment, and that it's, you know, not toxic for your employees. Okay, we probably don't have to take much time on this, but you know, I just want you to think about, either right now or maybe later on, again, looking at those that you thought were effective or ineffective, and maybe even just, you know, jotting down on a piece of paper what the differences were, and are you doing that at your organization, or there's some things that you could do. I mean, I realize that there are different type of organizations, and that not everything can be done with every type of business. I realize that you have to tailor it somewhat to the type of business that you have, but I think this is a good way for you to kind of sit back, re-examine this, and look if there's things that you can stop doing, continue to do, or maybe start to do to make your culture a little bit more effective and high performing. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, is to have a high performing company culture. So I don't know if everyone has heard or seen this quote before by Peter Drucker that says, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." And if we were in a room together, I would ask everyone what you thought that meant. But since we unfortunately aren't, I'll talk a little bit about this. So think about this. If you had the #1 strategist in the United States work with you and your leadership team to come up with the best strategy you could for the next 5 years, and yet you have this toxic work environment or inefficient or culture where employees don't trust leadership or that sort of thing, it's not going to matter what that strategy looks like. You're probably not going to be there, or excuse me, you're probably not going to get there if you don't have the right culture in place. So, I think that's what Peter Drucker means here, is that, you've got to get the culture piece right if you really want to succeed on the strategy side of things. So I hope that makes sense for everybody. Again, later on, if we have some questions and somebody wants to ask a little bit more about that, please do. Okay, so company culture from a numbers perspective. So if you have a toxic company culture, it decreases your productivity by 40%. And if you can increase it or get it to a positive culture, you can increase it by 30 to 40%. So think about that. If you can take a company culture that is toxic and you can move it into being that positive culture, you could have an increase in productivity of 70 to 80%, which is huge. Again, going back to those of you that worked in that toxic work environment, I really doubt that the leaders wanted to decrease the productivity by that much. So again, goes to that, I don't think they realized how the employees were feeling about it, and the only way to really understand that is to survey them. One of the things that I learned, as Sierra said in the beginning, I have 20 years of experience working in human resources. So I worked with the managers a lot on performance appraisals and who to promote and who to hire. But I always had an open door policy where employees could come talk to me about their managers. I did exit interviews. And one of the things that I will tell you is the manager's perception and the employee's perception can be quite different. So I just want you to think about that, and that there may be some things going on within your organization that you don't realize because your perception is a little bit different than what the employees are. The next bullet there says 46% of job seekers cite company culture as very important when choosing to apply to a company. About 2-3 years ago, I worked at an organization that had a reduction in force. They reduced their workforce by 40%, and yours truly was in that 40%. And I was looking for a job, and I saw one that I was interested in, but I knew somebody that had worked there. So I reached out to her and asked her about this place and whether she thought I should apply. Now, she no longer worked there. She gave me a lot of stories and reasons why I should not work there. She said, it's totally up to you, but if I was you, I wouldn't, and these are the reasons why. She was even so nervous about it. She didn't want me to share that with anyone. I could tell, even though she didn't work there anymore, that the culture was still affecting her. And the reason that I share this with you is that again, the reason to have a really strong culture is it's going to make a difference in what your applicant pool looks like. If you get the reputation out there on the street that you're not a good place to work at, it's going to affect, again, who applies for your job and who you're able to bring on to your company. So, yeah, please consider that. Also, last one, 88% of employees believe a strong company culture is key to business success. And the reason that I wanted to include this is that I don't think it's going to be or would be a hard sell to the employees in trying to develop and create a strong company culture. So if you came out and said, hey, we have this new initiative, this is what I want to do, and get maybe some input from them so that they have some buy-in to the process and are more committed to it, and that I think that you would have willing participants, because nobody wants to work in a toxic work environment. I think they would be very up for the challenge and be very engaged in any type of process like that you would want to bring in to your company. All right. So I'm going to go through this slide really quickly. Some of the things we've kind of already touched on. So why does it matter? It matters and affects the employees' engagement, the morale of the organization. I don't know if you've ever noticed that sometimes just when you walk into a business or a company that you can feel the positivity, or there's kind of like a buzz to Sierra smiling. This must be hitting a note for her, where you can feel the energy and the synergy and the excitement of the place just as you walk in the door. So it affects your employees' morale. It affects your turnover. I know from my work in human resources that they estimate the cost of turnover to be about 30% of the person's salary. So if you have somebody leave your organization that's making $45,000 a year, to replace them, it's going to cost you about $15,000. Now, that's not all in hard costs. Some of that's soft costs. And what I mean by that is, taking time out of your schedule to interview people, to look through resumes, for somebody to do the new employee orientation, for them to be trained and get up to speed and that sort of thing. So again, not hard costs. I mean, hard costs would be more like, if you placed an ad somewhere that cost money or something like that. But again, if you can have that positive company culture, then you're going to reduce your turnover. Now, I don't believe that all turnover is bad. Sometimes it's healthy and it's good to bring in new people with new ideas and that. But obviously, you don't want to lose your top performers, because of the culture that they're working in. Increase creativity and innovation. If somebody really enjoys where they're working, they're going to use more energy to be creative and innovative versus, just not caring and being present, or presenteeism, where they're at work, but they're not really giving their full potential. We've already talked about they're going to be more productive, and it's going to help with the employees' well-being as well as the leaders' well-being, if you can have that high-performing culture. All right, we're going to talk about the 4 types of company culture. First one there on the left upper corner talks about a clan culture. And I want to share with you a place that I worked that I consider to have a strong extended family culture. I worked at a place called American Federal back in the early 90s. It was a savings and loan, and the savings and loan went through a crisis. Many of them were dissolved, which is what happened with American Federal. The thing that I find phenomenal about American Federal is that it probably was dissolved in 1992, I want to say, or so. Anyway, they have been having a company picnic, and this fall, it has been going on for 30 years. 30 years. So 30 years after this company closed its doors, there are still employees that are getting together once a year for this company picnic, which I find phenomenal. And because I'm passionate about culture, I went back and asked the employees why. What was it about the company culture there that has people still getting together? One of them was because they treated you like family. Another reason that I will be bringing up here shortly, but very strong extended family environment. Now, I do think that every organization has to have a portion of each of these. So you can't be so involved in making everyone feel like an extended family that you aren't concerned about the bottom dollar. I mean, you still got to be concerned about the bottom dollar, right? but you may be a little bit more focused on, or your culture overall is going to be maybe a clan type culture. The other thing is, I think that you can have within a company, you can have an overarching type of company culture, and then you can have different cultures within the organization. So let me give you an example of that. I worked at a company that did cancer research. And so we wanted people to be take risks in the research and development side of things, but we also had a manufacturing part of the business where we were manufacturing a product for clinical trials that was being given to not only I guess did we do research from the mice side of things, but these were products that were going into humans that were involved in our clinical trials. So we needed to have very strong SOPs or standards of procedures. There needed to be a lot of structure. They need to be, you know, they had things that really needed to be followed. And so from that department, or that, they were a little bit more structured than I would say the R&D side of things are. Same with if each of you have a sales department, your sales department's probably going to have a little bit different culture than maybe other parts of your organization. And all of us probably have one type that we kind of gravitate towards. Now, the one I probably gravitate away from would be the hierarchy. That just happens to be me and my personality. And I at one point was like, why would anybody want to work in that very structured, controlled environment? But there are times when you have to. I mean, if you are fighting a fire, you can't sit around and talk about what's the best way to fight the fire. You have to have, it has to be very structured, very controlled. Somebody has to be in charge and, you know, stating what needs to be done and how it needs to be done, and you really need to follow that. Now that's when you're on the job. Now maybe back when they're at the fire station, you know, maybe the culture is a little bit more different when they're there. And I'm going to guess the different fire stations have different cultures again when they're at the fire station. That again, that would be part of that overarching culture of that place. But there are going to be times when the structure is very important. Now, my husband was in the Air Force for 20 years. He's retired Air Force, and he gravitates probably more towards that hierarchy type of working, and really likes the structure and that sort of thing, where I like more being creative in that. So we none of them, I guess what I'm trying to say, none of these are necessarily right or wrong. And I think, again, every organization needs a piece of those. But you need to decide what's best for your company and what kind of culture is the best fit, you know, overall, and knowing that they're going to be different within different departments. So if you look at the top of the clan, and that this, at the very top here, these two cultures are more a flexible type of culture. The one at the bottom is going to be one that is more with regards to stability and control. And then if you look to the right, these two are going to be more of an external focus, and the other two are going to be more of an internal focus. So again, you need to maybe even look at the type of industry that you're in. Okay. And if you have any questions about that later on, please ask me. Oh, one thing I wanted to add to this, looking at my notes here, underneath the clan, another one that I think would be nice to put in here is to have fun. I think that that's an important part of the work environment. If it's appropriate fun, that it's not hurting anybody's feelings and that sort of thing. So I want to give an example of that. I worked at a company, and we used Voya for our 401k plan. And if any of you are familiar with Voya, they have the commercials where they have the orange rabbits and the orange mouse. Yeah, it's a mouse. I think it's a mouse. I can't remember. Squirrel for sure. And we were introducing Voya, and we had all of these paper mice that Voya had sent to us that you put together, sitting all around the building. And we were going through a campaign that said, "We are relentless." We had all received T-shirts that said, "We are relentless" on them. And we were relentless in our cancer research. And one day I came to work, and we had one of these little squirrels sitting by the reception desk. And somebody had put a "We Are Relentless" T-shirt on this little squirrel. And it really was a lot of fun. To this day, I don't know who did it. We were all trying to guess who did it. I just thought it said a lot about our culture, and that they thought that was fun to do and thought it was appropriate. And we all enjoyed it. And it was kind of a back to that buzz around the office. So again, I think having fun should be part of it as well. So here, talking about, I gotta look at my time here. I might have to speed up a little bit. Looking at the pieces to the puzzle, I wanted to redo this, but I couldn't figure out how to get this puzzle pieces. And I like this so much because I think that a company culture really is bringing all the pieces together. Because I realized that behaviors is spelled the way that more of a European spelling to it. I like the fact that it has the leader at the top, because you cannot have a consistent culture if you are saying that you want your culture to have integrity, but you have leaders that do not demonstrate integrity. I know that sounds like common sense, but going back to those toxic work environments, I'm going to guess that somebody on this call has maybe worked with someone that didn't show integrity. And again, you can't have that high performing culture if you aren't consistent in what you say you want and what you do. So it's back again to those behaviors. You also want to look at, your practices. How do you do things? If I want a new laptop, what does it take to get one? Do I just have to ask for one? Or do I have to justify why I need one? Does it have to go through 5 signatures? Again, it kind of goes back to what kind of control do you have within your organization and that. What are your shared beliefs, values, and assumptions? So I'm sure many of you are aware that a while back that Wells Fargo had a situation where they were having fake accounts developed by the employees so that they could get their bonuses. Well, somehow, some way, that became acceptable within their culture. So again, it goes back to when we were talking about the Hawthorne Effect, and it becomes a social system, and somehow that broke down and became a part of their culture. And at some level, for some of the employees, it was okay to do that. So you want to really make sure that you have strong values, strong beliefs, strong assumptions, and that if you do put in a incentive program, that you're making sure there's a check and balance, and that your employees aren't undermining the process so they can win those awards. The visibility and the day-to-day way the work gets done. How do you go about accomplishing a goal? How is there a lot of creativity in it? Do you get to have a lot of your own say, or is it very structured in the way that you do it? Again, what are the behaviors that the employees demonstrate when they're going about their day-to-day work? And then again, it's back to being evident in the way that the individuals work, also how the team works together. Another thing, I kept talking about that overarching culture. Different teams can have different cultures as well. So sometimes that's influenced by the person that you put in charge of the team or of the group. That's going to influence those behaviors within the organization. All right. So just real quickly, stories convey culture. So I just want to mention to you that our brains are designed to remember stories. So, think about back millions of years, sitting around the fire, the way that things got carried down and were taught was through stories. So again, our brain is designed to be able to remember those. So I would encourage you throughout your company, if there's ways in which you can instill stories, not only about the culture, but about other things, it will be very advantageous to you and to the company. So one way that you can do this is with onboarding. And what I mean by onboarding is somebody's first day. When you sit down with them, you're teaching about the organization and that sort of thing. You know, maybe you want to tell a story about how the company got started. Maybe there's a memorable event, like for example, I think it was it Vermeer that was hit by the tornado a year or so ago. You know, they could talk about that event and what happened and how they came back stronger after, you know, they were hit by that tornado. That may be a memorable event that they could highlight. Or if there's milestones, maybe when the company went public, or you know, you hit a certain financial threshold or that you want to share that's kind of exciting and it gets them excited about the company. And just, you know, they can share those stories with their families, or, you know, what I learned about the company today, and they become excited about working for you and your organization. All right. The CEO of Zappos says here, we believe that it's really important to come up with core values that you can commit to. And by commitment, we mean that we're willing to hire and fire based on them. If you're not willing to do that, then if you're willing to do that, then you're well on your way to build a company culture that is in line with the brand you want to build. So I want to go back to my story of American Federal, the company that employees still get together 30 years later. And I mentioned that I asked the people that were there and that still come what it was about American Federal, and the person that was head of HR at the time said if someone wasn't fitting into their culture, they let them go. So if there was, you know, working against it or just a bad egg, if you will, they were willing to let them go. And I think that says a lot for the kind of culture that they created, part of the reason that they are still getting together this many years afterwards. So I want to know real quickly with our group, and I'm running out of time here, is if you're hiring for company culture. One says NA. Oh, we got 83% saying they do. I'm not sure. We have a couple saying NA. 70% say yes. Awesome. Awesome, awesome. Okay. Since we're running out of time, I'm glad to hear that 70% of you are doing that. I would highly recommend and excited to hear that 70% of you are doing that. And if we had more time and we were in a group setting, I'd love to hear, you know, what your process is for hiring with for a cultural fit. So, you know, it comes down to, I think some of it just comes down to asking them about the type of culture that they enjoy working in. And that, as I said, my husband likes the hierarchy, I don't. So you kind of can get a feel from that standpoint. We talked about onboarding. It's important to include it there. Be willing to pass on someone for promotion if they aren't demonstrating the cultures, behaviors that you want. Make it a piece of your performance management. You know, percentage of the performance management program, it has to do with, are they meeting and showing the behaviors of the organizational culture. Reward them when they demonstrate those, maybe with a simple note. As you see, I've got specific details reinforcing that. So instead of saying, great job working with that customer, say, great job working with that customer. I really like that you did, you know, X, Y, and Z. And then address undesirable behaviors that don't support your culture. And I would say do that early, and you know, don't dwell on it, just address it quickly so that you can stop that behavior from becoming embedded into your social system of your culture. A few additional quotes here I wanted to just mention is that corporate culture is the only sustainable competitive advantage that is completely within the control of the entrepreneur. And I thought this was very timely with COVID-19 going on, is that, you know, a lot of things have been out of our control, but you have had the ability to keep this sustainable during this COVID-19. So, you know, what have you been doing if your employees have had to work from home? You know, how have you handled that? Are you communicating with your employees, and how are you keeping that company culture as we go through this? And how will you reinstill it when they come back to work? And then this other author says he thought it was a soft skill, but now he realizes that culture has everything to do with the bottom line. So that's really what I'm trying to impress on you here today, is that why I know it doesn't always get a lot of attention. It should, because it's really important and really can make a difference in your profitability. And I'll wrap it up here in 5 minutes so we can ask some questions here. I don't know if everyone's familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I've used this exact same slide when I've done some training on leadership. And I think that you need to consider these things not only with regards to leadership, but also with regards to your culture. So you've got to start with the basics and then work your way up. So if there's needs are met from a safety standpoint, then you can move on up to the other levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You can include the as far as making it come alive, you can put your mission statement, your vision statement on the wall, put it in the entryway, put it behind your receptionist. If you even want to put something about your culture or quotes that you find inspirational, you can make it prominent on your website, include it in all your communication with your employees, have the employees included with their email signature. Again, make it part of your onboarding process and include it in your performance management. So, other things that you can do is have contests with your employees, rewards and awards. So again, try to think of creative ways that you can make that culture come alive by, you know, again, having maybe a contest and see, you know, what they can do to pull out that culture so that everyone's living that culture. Employees love to be involved, they're more engaged if you can include them in anything like this. So I know I rushed through that last little part there, but do we have any questions? And then I will, maybe Sierra can send out this information about your your challenge. Send out this slide. I'll have you send that out. I've also included some information about leaders are always learning, and where you can find some free courses and some resources with regards to learning.
Ronnie, someone was asking if the slides would be available for them after the webinar.
Yeah, I can do that. Sure.
Okay, perfect.
Yep. So we have, I know I ran over a little bit and I rushed kind of at the end, which is another good reason to give them the slides, because I know I wanted to give us some time to have time for questions.
A question that that I personally have is, what is a good way to, like in your personal experience and guidance, what are a couple ways to instill trust in your team members?
Oh, yes, you brought that up. I think it's harder to rebuild trust once it's been broken. I think that if you don't haven't broken that trust, hopefully it's going to be there. But one of the ways that you can demonstrate, if you're a leader, demonstrate to your employees that you have trust in them is by not micromanaging them. If you micromanage someone and they don't feel that you trust them, you know, so anything that you're and if you do want to know how they're going to do with the project, then say, give them the project and say, tell me how you're going to go about this if you're not quite sure, and so that you can negotiate and talk through, well, I'm a little concerned with that. What about, we do it this way? And, you can, again, work through those. And, yeah, because you need to be able to trust your manager. If you can't, then it's going to be very detrimental relationship. And the hardest one, again, is to try to rebuild that trust if it's been broken. You can do it, but it's a lot harder.
Tony asks, what if the leader's behavior is a problem and it is a blind spot for them?
Oh, well, good question. A couple of different thoughts on that. Obviously I do coaching, but that's one of the things that coaching does is it shows leaders their blind spots, because you're right, they can't see them. And I know it's probably, if this is a subordinate, it's kind of hard to go to your boss and say, have you ever thought about, coaching? Depending on the relationship, you might be able to do that. You'd have to sell them on the benefits and how it could benefit the leader. Don't make it about the employee and about what it would do for you, but what it would do for them. It depends on what kind of relationship you have with them. You have to have that psychological safety. Would you be able to address that with them, and feel that you could do that without there being harm? Or is there another leader that's their equal that could talk to them? The other thing that I've had people do in the past, if you work at a big enough organization that has an employee assistance program, I've called them to give me help on how to address someone. I mean, they're trained therapists that have a master's degree, and you can say, here's my situation, I'm not sure how to approach it, could you give me some tips? So I've done that before.
Thank you. I have 2 more questions.
Okay.
When the CEO has to instill a policy or implement a decision that is non-negotiable, how would they still make the team feel a part of it rather than it feeling dictatorish, or a softer way to implement non-negotiables?
Well, I always believe in clear communication, so I think that they would need to communicate that this was something that was coming from the board. And I think the why would be important. So why are they implementing it? Why do they feel so passionate about it? I mean, meaning the board. Why does the board think that this is a change that we need to make at this point? They still might not agree. And I'm trying to think of an example, but is there any way, even if, I don't know, let's say that the board wants to use a new software package, and and people are like, oh, I don't want to switch, I like what we have. Do they have any say in how it's implemented? Or, is there any part of it that they can have, or can you create a contest of the person that, comes up with the most positive reasons that this software is going to be better, or, somebody be a champion for it, or, just, again, is there any part of it that the employees can have control over? Does that make sense? So they may not have control over that we have to use this software, but is there anything they can choose or have say in? Now, maybe that there isn't going to be. It has to be instilled by next Thursday, and but if there is some way, that's the way I would go about it.
So Molly asks, what is the first step in determining the culture for your company or organization, and how to have a productive conversation with other leadership?
Okay, so the first question was how
What's
to go
the
about
first step, in determining culture for your company?
Well, the first step would be determining if you're the owner or the leader, is what kind of culture you want. I mean, is there some company culture that you want to model? you want to, if you go back and look at those types, which one would you want to model? Again, I don't think it's an all or nothing. You can't just have the clan. Do you want it to be 80% of a clan type culture? Do you want it to, or is it such that you need to have more of a hierarchy type? And then what behaviors and what things do you need to put in place to make that happen? If that doesn't make sense, please reach out to me individually, and I'll be happy to walk through that, because I don't know the organization, and I don't know, don't feel like I have enough to be able to give her a real solid answer. And then she had a second part to it.
Yep, it was how to have productive conversations with other leadership.
How to have productive with regards to the culture, or just in general?
Maybe a little bit of both.
Okay. I guess, to have productive conversations, I always think it's important to influence is a big part of leadership. When I teach about leadership, I talk about, what is leadership? It's being able to influence others to a common goal. So I think that you need to work on, if that's an area you're not strong in, work on your influencing skills, try to get buy-in from them. A lot of times it's really good to ask a lot of questions, like, what do you think? What are your recommendations? What do you suggest? And so you can hear their side of things, and you can maybe come to some kind of common ground, versus it being you kind of telling them. You're involving them in the solution and talking to them. And yeah.
Okay, I have one last question for you.
Okay.
What is the best way to engage your team without having meeting fatigue?
Yeah, I'm trying to decide how often it depends on how often you're having meetings, how long you're having meetings. Are there things that you can do in the meetings, like, obviously from a break, or can you have a stand-up meeting, or can you start off with a little game, or something kind of fun, because having fun, and this is kind of going on a different topic, but it floods your mind and your brain with positive, good chemicals that makes creativity and innovation, and it just resets your brain. Or I know it depends on your culture. Again, you may want to be able to, I have played the song Happy before. How's it go? I'm trying to remember. Is it by Pharrell Williams? It's high energy. It's a lot of fun. It just gets your blood flowing and that sort of thing. And so, or ask them. These meetings, I know sometimes they're draining, and I'd like them to be more engaging. Do you guys have any suggestions on how we can do that? They probably love it. Employees like to be involved. They love to be involved. So that's one thing you could do.
Okay, thank you so much for today and sharing just so many different ideas. I will be sending out an email to all of the attendees with your PowerPoint, and then your contact information as well.
All right. Well, thank you, Sierra, and thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. I had to rush a little, so if anyone has any question for me, please, please, please reach out to me.
All right. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you, Ronnie.
Yep. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.